bell above the pharmacy door had a particular sound, not the sharp electronic beep of newer stores, but a soft, old-fashioned chime that always made me feel like I was stepping somewhere safe. I had been coming to that same pharmacy on Ridgewood Avenue for 11 years. I knew which aisle had the reading glasses. I knew the woman at the photo counter always kept butterscotch candies in a little dish by the register. I knew where everything was, and everything knew me. That Thursday afternoon in late October, I was not thinking about any of that. I was thinking about the stack of paper sitting in my kitchen, held together by a binder clip, waiting for my signature. My nephew had left them there 2 days earlier. He had driven 4 hours from Charlotte to sit across from me at my own kitchen table and explain, very carefully, with a yellow legal pad and a pen he kept clicking, that what he was suggesting was simply the smart thing to do, the practical thing, the thing my late husband would have wanted. "You're 67 years old, Aunt Carol," he had said. "The property taxes alone are killing you. The house is too big. You don't need all of it." He wasn't wrong about the taxes. He wasn't wrong about the taxes. He wasn't wrong about the house. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a yard I had stopped being able to maintain the way I used to. My husband had done most of that. Before he got sick, before everything changed. What my nephew was proposing was simple, on paper. He had a colleague, a financial planner, he said, very reputable, had helped a lot of families in transition, who had put together a plan. I would sign over power of attorney, a limited one, he was careful to say, just for financial matters, just so they could restructure things, move some accounts, handle the real estate paperwork. It would free me up. I wouldn't have to deal with any of it. He had said, "Free me up," 3 times during that conversation. I had smiled and said I would look everything over. He had smiled back and said he knew I would make the right decision. He kissed my cheek before he laughed, and I stood at the door and watched his rental car back out of my driveway, and I did not feel free at all. That Thursday, I needed antacids. That is genuinely why I went to the pharmacy. My stomach had been bothering me for 2 days. Probably stress, probably the coffee I kept drinking too much of, probably everything. I parked in my usual spot near the side entrance. I took a cart even though I only needed one ding because my knees had been bad and the cart helped me move around the store without feeling like I was limping. I was in the 3rd aisle reading the back of a bottle when I heard a voice. It was coming from the narrow gap between the tall shelving unit and the back wall, one of those dead spaces in old stores that nobody ever really clears out, just stacks things in. I wasn't trying to listen. I wasn't paying attention at all. But one word reached me through the shelving and stopped my hand mid-reach. My name. Not my first name. My last name. The full one. Sutherland. I stood very still. The voice was male. Not my nephew's voice, someone else. Speaking quietly, but not quietly enough. Sutherland account, the one I told you about. She's signing Friday. Full POA, financial and property both. There was a pause. A response I couldn't hear. No, she thinks it's limited. That's the whole point. Neil took care of that. The language is in Section 4, buried in the definitions. Her attorney never reviewed it. She said she'd handle it herself. Another pause. By next week, we move the brokerage account. The house listing goes up 30 days after that. She won't even look. Just have the transfers ready. I'll confirm tomorrow. And then there was the sound of someone walking, heading toward the front of the store. I did not move. I don't know how long I stood there with my hand on that shelf. It might have been 30 seconds. It might have been 30 seconds. It might have been 3 minutes. The antacid bottle was still in my hand. The fluorescent light above me flickered once and held. Somewhere near the pharmacy counter, someone was laughing at something on the television mounted near the ceiling. I made myself breathe. I have lived 67 years. I raised 2 children, mostly on my own, after my husband's first health scare when they were in middle school. I managed the household accounts for 22 years of marriage, kept a spreadsheet, paid off a second mortgage, put both kids through state school without loans. I am not, by any measure, a woman who falls apart in a pharmacy aisle. But I will tell you honestly, my hands were shaking. The papers on my kitchen table, Section 4, buried in the definitions. I thought about the pen my nephew kept clicking. I waited until I was certain whoever had been speaking had moved away. Then I walked, slowly, deliberately, the way I always walk because of my knees, toward the pharmacy counter at the back of the store. There was a woman behind the counter I recognized. Beverly. She had worked there for at least 7 years. She had filled my husband's prescriptions during his last year. She had always been kind about the insurance paperwork. She looked up when I approached, and something in my face must have been visible because her expression shifted immediately. She came around the counter. "Mrs. Sutherland, are you all right? I need you to listen to me," I said, "and I need you to not make a fuss. Can you do that?" She nodded. She reached for my arm, gently, steadying me, and guided me to the little chair they kept by the blood pressure machine. "Tell me," she said. So I told her, quietly, quickly, what I had heard, the name. Section 4, Friday, the transfers. Beverly did not say, "Are you sure you heard that right?" She did not say, "I'm sure there's an explanation." She looked at me directly and said, "Do you have an attorney you trust? Not the one handling the papers." I thought of my daughter's neighbor, a man named Gerald who did estate work. I had met him twice at summer gatherings. He had given me his card once, jokingly, after I'd mentioned some confusion over my husband's will. I had kept the card in my desk drawer because I keep everything. I told Beverly I thought I might. "Call him before you go home," she said. "Call him from here if you want. I'll stand right here." I called from the pharmacy waiting area with Beverly 3 feet away, pretending to restock the vitamin display. Gerald picked up on the second ring, which surprised me. I told him I needed someone to look at a document before Friday. He asked what kind. I told him power of attorney, financial and property, and that I had some concerns about the language in Section 4. There was a brief silence. "Don't sign anything," he said. "I mean it, Carol. Not even a receipt. I'll come to you." He came the next morning. He sat at my kitchen table in the same chair my nephew had sat in, and he put on his reading glasses and went through every page of that document slowly and without speaking. I made coffee. I stood by the window and watched the neighbor's dog nose around the yard fence. I did not ask Gerald what he was thinking because his face was already telling me. When he finished, he set the document down and took his glasses off and looked at me. "This is not a limited power of attorney," he said. "I know," I said. "This gives full financial and property authority. If you had signed this, you would have had no legal control over your checking account, your brokerage account, or your home within 30 days. Possibly sooner, depending on how quickly they acted." I sat down across from him. "My nephew brought this to me," I said. Gerald nodded slowly, the way people do when they already understand something and are simply confirming it to themselves. "The firm listed here, I know this name. They've come up before in a different context, not good context." He asked if he could take the document. I said yes. He asked if I had a safe place to stay for a few days, just to be careful, until things were sorted. I said I would call my daughter. I called my daughter from my bedroom, standing with the door closed, looking out at the same yard I had looked at from the kitchen. The leaves had mostly fallen by then. The oak at the back still had a few. She answered on the first ring. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long moment. "Mom," she said, "how long has Neil been talking to you about this?" "About 3 months," I said. Another silence. "I'm leaving now," she said. "I'll be there in 2 hours. Don't answer the door for anyone." She arrived in 1 hour and 40 minutes. I found out later, through Gerald, through the people Gerald contacted, that the man I had overheard in the pharmacy was a financial consultant who had worked with my nephew on at least 3 previous cases involving elderly relatives. What they did was not simple fraud exactly. It was more precise than that. They found families where there was already a degree of trust, already a reasonable-sounding need, already a person who was managing more than they should have to manage alone. They offered simplicity. They offered help. They buried the real terms in the language of the document and banked on the fact that most people don't hire a second attorney to review paperwork brought to them by family. Most people don't. My nephew called me on Friday, the day I was supposed to sign. He called at 10 in the morning, cheerful, asking if I had any questions before he drove back up that weekend. I let it go to voicemail. Gerald had already contacted the appropriate authorities by then. I will not go into every detail of what followed because some of it is still ongoing and some of it is not mine alone to tell. What I will say is that my nephew knew what was in those papers. He had known from the beginning. The colleague, the financial planner, the very reputable man who had helped so many families in transition, they had worked this particular scheme at least twice before, and this was the first time someone had overheard anything. Because I had needed antacids? Because Beverly had been working that afternoon? Because I have spent 67 years keeping business cards in my desk drawer and learning the names of people who are kind to me, and on one particular Thursday in October, that turned out to matter. The documents were shredded. The power of attorney was never filed. My brokerage account, my checking account, and the house on Ridgewood, all of it stayed exactly where it had always been. In my name. Under my control. I had the pharmacy receipt from that day framed. Beverly thought that was ridiculous. I told her it was my money and my wall, and I would hang whatever I pleased. She laughed. It was the first time in about a week I had heard someone laugh and felt like joining in. I still go to that pharmacy. I still park in the same spot. Beverly still keeps the blood pressure chair available near the counter, and she still nods at me when I come through the door, and we don't make a production of any of it. Some things don't need to be a production. What I think about now, sometimes, when I'm in the kitchen making coffee in the morning, is how close it was. Not in a panicked way. More in the way of someone who has looked at a thing squarely and decided they are going to look at it squarely from now on. I loved my nephew once. I don't know what to do with that now. I suspect I won't know for a while, and I've decided that's allowed. My daughter calls every morning. She didn't used to, not consistently. She does now. Every morning without fail, before either of us has had breakfast. We talk about nothing important mostly. The weather, what she's cooking, what I'm planting in the spring. It is the best part of my day. The oak in the backyard still has 2 leaves on it. I have been watching to see which one falls first. I don't know why that matters to me. It just does. It's mine to watch, and that is enough. I think about the anacid sometimes. The bottle I was holding when I heard my last name come through a pharmacy shelf. Something that ordinary, a stomach that wouldn't settle, a cart I grabbed because my knees were bad, and that was the thing that saved me. Not a dramatic intervention, not a stroke of luck I could have planned for, just a Thursday afternoon errand. That's the part that stays with me. I spent a long time after everything happened trying to understand how I had gotten so close to the edge without seeing it. I'm not a careless person. I kept records. I read things before I signed them. I had lived long enough to know that people don't always want what they say they want. And still. Neil sat across from me at my own kitchen table in my own house, clicking that pen, and I smiled and said I would look everything over. I believed, somewhere underneath the unease, that family meant something, that the relationship was real even if the paperwork felt off. What I've come to understand is that good character isn't just about your own intentions. It's about being honest enough with yourself to name what you're actually feeling. I felt uneasy from the first conversation. I called it stress. I called it grief. Missing my husband, being tired. What I didn't do was say out loud, something here is wrong. That honesty with myself, before anyone else, was the thing I owed myself and didn't give. Beverly gave it to me instead. She looked at my face and didn't explain it away. She didn't say, "I'm sure it's fine," or "maybe you misheard." She asked what I needed, and then she stood 3 feet away while I made a phone call, pretending to restock vitamins because she understood that some moments require a witness. That is its own kind of moral courage. The quiet, undramatic kind that doesn't announce itself. She didn't know me well. She had no reason to involve herself. She did it anyway because it was the right thing, and she could see it clearly. Gerald read every page of that document without rushing. He put on his glasses and he went slowly, and when he was done, he told me the truth plainly and without softening it more than necessary. That kind of clarity, the willingness to think carefully, to not skim, to sit with uncomfortable information until you understand it, that is what protected me in the end. Not luck, not instinct. Someone doing the slow, careful work of actually reading what was in front of them. And I had to find something in myself, too. After Gerald left, after my daughter drove 2 hours in under 2 hours, after the calls were made, there was still the part where I had to decide what I was going to do with all of it. The grief of it. The specific grief of realizing that someone you loved looked at your life and saw an opportunity. I didn't collapse into that. I won't pretend it was easy not to, but I didn't. I made coffee. I watched the yard. I waited for what came next, and I dealt with it. You don't get through something like this by being fearless. You get through it by being afraid and moving anyway. By trusting the people who have earned it. By doing the slow, unglamorous work of reading Section 4. The oak in my backyard still has 2 leaves. I've been watching them all week. They're still mine to watch. That's what I keep coming back to.